Hi guys, today we're going to be covering the Etheria live stream and a couple of the major highlights from the announcement / reveal stream. However, if I were to honestly recommend a suggestion, if you were someone that wants to, I guess, basically find out every single detail or every single change that was added, I encourage you, and I will include the link for the full live stream itself. But there was actually a total of something crazy like 700 or like 2,000, 3,000 words or something that I used for the purposes of all the different additions and reveals that they showcased. Without further ado though, and apologies again as I'm still sick, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first thing they described when it came to the game is basically giving us a description of what Atheria Restart is all about. In terms of that, it is a technically quote-unquote open exploration game with deep strategic elements, and this is fine. However, in terms of the actual focus of the game, they focus a lot on the characters or a character building process. However, they don't only cater specifically to something like PvE, as PvP, and I don't mean PvP as in like fighting against other players in some slot machine or in some arcade, but rather you actually fight against other players and their built units in a lot of different PvP modes. Now, in addition to this, there is an extreme focus on the character variety or diversity in this game. They announced so many characters, to be honest, and as you're seeing on screen right now, they are also allowing us to pre-register, with the official launch of the game being on June 5th. Now, in addition to this, they did also explain that the story is, I guess, or the setting of the game takes place in a future where humanity has collapsed, and honestly, a bit dystopian, or rather, I should say, a bit post-apocalyptic, a bit too post-apocalyptic. I guess feeling for me, just because it feels like most gacha games nowadays are set in that specific setting. However, in terms of the actual location that you have access to, or one of the first things that they show us rather, is the location where you hang out as the main character, and in terms of that, just being or seeing your little home area is honestly pretty cool. Now, in addition to this, they also mentioned that there's other things like unions, and this alongside many of the other different game modes in the game are really exciting. But there were also various tidbits or exciting little information or details that they showcased while they were going through the stream. This includes, again, things like the kind of, I guess, the continuous battle or background battling, which is something that's present in games like Epic 7, but not so present in other games. Now, for transparency's sake, I will say that as someone that plays a lot of gacha games, having a do something in the background while you're, you know, like I can farm out my energy, but also upgrade my gear at the same time. Doing this all at the same time is pretty interesting, and though it isn't completely confirmed yet, I would imagine that with the continuous background battling, this would allow you to play something like PvP, Arena, or RTA while you're farming at the same time, which honestly is pretty cool. Now, in addition to this, they did showcase a lot of different bosses, and the bosses aren't just for show, though I do think that there is some value or appeal to just fighting against different bosses and trying to strategize against these enemies, but rather they also drop gear or certain accessories or, I guess, materials that allow you to upgrade and customize your teams and characters, which I honestly think is pretty cool too. Now, admittedly, the first section of the live stream did feel like we were, I guess, being reintroduced to what a gacha game was, which is fine. But after this, they did announce a lot of interesting concepts, including the fact that they have a beginner's banner, which again is really cool, and it allows you to guide or allows you to focus on things that you would have otherwise missed if you weren't, I guess, being handheld into the content. But in addition to this, they also showcase the fact that you will be having, or they also showcase the fact that they'll have a third-party site to also allow yourself, I guess, beginner resources in case that's something you're interested in. However, in addition to this, if you take a look at the one of the first announcements for content that wasn't just based on PvP, they did also announce on the PvE side that they have tons, at least from what I could tell, of multiplayer specific PvE content where you can fight against bosses, or other content where you'll have teams and you'll have to set or strategize so that you can clear content in that sense. So even from the get-go, Etheria Restart is already posing itself as a game that has quote-unquote end game, or at least multiplayer on both the single player and multiplayer fronts, which is honestly pretty cool. Now, they did go over a few of the characters, and from what I understand, we're being given a free team, and more specifically, one specific free character known as Animus Leon, who deals a lot of damage and will carry you through a lot of your early content. But honestly, even though it sounds like even though it seems like they already showcased a lot of characters, I think just from the trailers alone, we saw something like 20 or so, 15 to 20 characters. They did definitively or officially confirmed that there were 50 Animuses apparently going to be showcased or launched on release, which of course is crazy. Now, they did try to go over specifically not just the system and the rewards that you get for doing things like PvP or content like this, but in addition to this, they also showcased the actual systems or the kits of characters. Now, while they only went over, I believe, Freya specifically in terms of what she provided, and to be clear, she does look absolutely ridiculous, as she is a buffer, cleanser, combat readiness pusher, or like turn providing, damage dealing, healing character. The system will feel extremely similar to that of essentially what you'd expect from any turn-based game at this point, including again, two games that you'll probably hear me mention or reference a bunch of times, which is Epic 7 and also Honkai Star Rail. Now, moving past, I guess, specifically just the combat, they also did announce major things when it comes to the pulling system, or rather some other systems of the game. And that includes things like the fact that the pull system currently works such that every single pull costs 100 crystals. However, there isn't actually a 50-50 for the banners that you pull on for the limited specifically. Now, I need a bit of confirmation, as I'm not sure if this is true for the pulls after the fact. However, from what I understand, the specific wording was that 100 crystals are the cost for each pull, and there's no 50-50 for the first pull, as it is guaranteed to be the character that you're pulling for. Now, in addition to this, they also announced the beginner banner, which has a guarantee after 40 pulls. However, in addition to all this, they also added a rate up, or included a rate up for Messiah, who supposedly was a very popular character in the closed betas as well, which is always very cool. Now, in terms of the systems that they have, they do have an equipment system, but rather than having a weapon system, they actually replaced the weapon system with this shell/pet-esque system, which looks really cool. It does remind me a bit of, like, I wouldn't quite say it's like the ecosystem, but it is some sort of different non-pulling aspect that you can farm for, which is pretty cool. But in addition to this, they also mentioned that in terms of stats, you actually have the ability to block certain substats, or you can actually choose all three substats on the right side of like your gear. In any case, the system seems very varied and customized, and that actually brings me to a point that I want to talk about for this dev specifically, as they actually seem very consumer and player friendly, with them saying things like, oh, the current landscape for gacha games is extremely expensive and unaffordable, so we're giving you a bunch of different ways to make it more affordable, though of course at the end of the day, this is a gacha game. Now, you can take this as you will. However, it did feel extremely genuine, with them saying things like they don't want you to have to stress about pulling for certain characters on banners. So that means that limited characters, as soon as they're introduced with their rate up banner, actually go instantly into the standard banner. And in that sense, if you are a free-to-play player, you can actually just immediately RNG luck sack the character if you're pulling for them in the standard banner by random chance. However, they also announced that in terms of I guess in terms of like their revenue, they were still transparent about the fact that they need to have revenue, obviously, to continue business, as they are a business. But beyond all these things, they also had an insane emphasis on the fact that they wanted players to know that they wanted 4 stars and characters that they release in the future to not only have their importance or their their significance reliant on their numbers, but rather their experience and what they offer in terms of a niche or general gameplay approach. What I mean by this, of course, is that they want to introduce characters that are not just all jack of trade-esque, which is the exact words that Jack, their official dev, announced, but rather they announced specifically that they wanted characters that were sometimes perhaps niche, but still had a specific purpose that they obviously would be taken for. Now, beyond this, they also mentioned that the internal team that plays and develops the game does also test their characters all game, or test their characters all day. However, their overall goal is to make the characters more balanced while also being diverse and exciting. Which again, I would kind of agree is going to be a difficult task, as a lot of people have pointed out, with how free to play the game is and with how lofty their goals are. Introducing a game that has extreme free to play elements while also being balanced, while also being exciting, is quite difficult. But of course, I'm on the side of the devs and I'm hopeful for what this game has to offer. Now, as a final note, again, they did announce that in terms of the overall system of the game, they have PvP modes, they have excuse me, PvE modes, and they also have content that focuses more on the social aspect, including things like the unions. However, in all of these contents, or in all of these content categories, they plan on introducing new releases for all specific modes. And for me personally, just from what I've seen about Etheria Restart, this is all very positive and I'm very hopeful for its release. Now, as a final note, they did want to hammer in the fact that the game will be releasing on the 5th. And though there was honestly an insane content overload in terms of what was announced, I was personally very happy with what they showed. It feels like the dev, Jack specifically, being able to speak in English and trying to develop that relationship with players was very, very cool. However, I think his idea or his kind of principles about not wanting players to break the bank when they play this game is honestly pretty. It's honestly kind of like a good breath, or it's a nice breath of fresh air. In any case though, guys, I'm probably going to be covering and testing that game when it comes out. As a final reminder as well, there is actually, if I'm not mistaken, going to be a final beta test on May 8th, which is pretty cool as well. But as always, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I apologize, I would have covered more of this, but this is actually my 3rd attempt in recording this, and as you can tell, my voice is a little messed up. My nose is super sniffly, and of course I've got a throbbing headache. Sorry again, but I just wanted to cover this because honestly I was watching this in bed and I was like, well, this is a pretty cool and interesting game. I wrote down a lot of the notes for what was announced, but ultimately, if you're interested in any more, I think the characters look cool, so I definitely consider it, or I definitely think that this game is worth a try. I'll again include the link for the live stream in the comment section or in the description, either one, whichever I remember. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.